All right, I call our meeting to order. Before we do that, actually, we're gonna stand up and say the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So now we'll officially call the meeting to order. We have no one in the audience today for public comment, so we'll breeze through that. Guess, but please, Lynn and Jim, if you be willing to come up, we'll start our conversation about water and sewer enterprise funds.
Your team. No, not today.
We had some last minute, as you know, folks who couldn't make it, and some were sick. So, but thank you so much for coming. I would love to start. I think it would be helpful for us, and also for anyone who's going to watch this on video or is watching at home, to get some more information about the GLSD. So, what is it? What does that mean to North Andover? What does that look like? And just a really good overview would be helpful.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. Jim Stanford, Public Works Director. I am the town's representative on the commission to GLSD, which is Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. It is located in North Andover, but it is a regional facility. It's a sewage treatment plant. So the vast majority of the sewage in North Andover is piped through the town's collection system and then processed over, it's actually pumped. It goes by gravity to the Riverside Pump Station, which is owned by GLSD, into their interceptor, and then goes into the plant. Like I said, it's located in North Andover. It's a regional facility. It has Lawrence, Methuen, Andover, and a portion of Salem, New Hampshire as well. We, from North Andover's perspective, we're about 15% of the flow, about 5 million gallons per year, or excuse me, per day. The plant itself processes about 30 million gallons per day. And that's seasonal. That's going to vary. Obviously, in the wet weather, you're going to have a lot more flow. So we're getting into the springtime. Those are when the typical highest flows occur. As far as the plant itself, I think it was designed and it was envisioned in 1968. The plant came online, I believe, 1977. Don't quote me on that, but I think thereabouts. Prior to that, essentially a lot of the sewage just went right into the river, the Merrimack River. So all of the industrial plants and that sort of thing. So it was really needed. It was really part of the Clean Water Act. What you started seeing, because the Merrimack River is the water source for a number of communities. We're fortunate to have Lake Cochicowick, but a lot of the other communities, the Merrimack does provide the water treatments or the water source. So it was all part of the Clean Water Act to really clean up the river. So essentially, trunk lines were installed. The individual communities tied into that trunk line. Again, there are a couple different trunk lines. And then it's pumped to the sewage treatment plant where it's processed, and then you're left with a byproduct. It's essentially a sludge. However, clean water or treated water is actually then discharged back into the Merrimack River. I know you've heard a lot about the CSOs, the combined sewer overflows.
Mm-hmm.
If you essentially, if you go back in time where sewage was just discharged right into the river, they then decided to pipe into the system whereby you had rainwater, sewage, and industrial waste all being combined. That's where the combined CSO comes from. And then it was dumped into the river, essentially. With the plant, now they can only process so much sewage. And what happens when the trunk line gets filled up, the sewage then, if the plant can't process it, it gets discharged right directly into the river still. So plant itself has made a number of upgrades over the years. We're upgrading the pumps to add more capacity. One of the best projects that they've done is they've created a biomass energy source, whereby essentially the plant now is just about a net zero user of electricity. They use the methane gas, they collect it from the waste product, and they run the plant on it. And so it's really, it's an incredible system that they've just, it just came online just recently. Whatever energy they don't use, they sell back to the grid. So a lot of good things are happening. As far as the CSOs goes, and again, a lot of, because everybody wants the river to be clean, the reason you have these CSOs is because when it rains with the combined sewer systems, it's just inundated. There's just too much flow going into the system. The state, over time, we do have a NIPDES, which is an EPA permit to discharge into the river. They've increased regulation over time, and I know we've talked before about, you know, looking at rates ahead and what's gonna happen in the future. And the NIPDES, every so often, they will create a new permit that you have to, and they'll put more stringent requirements on. And that's the situation we're in right now, where they're looking at different permits. They're upgrading our permit to discharge, and they're looking at putting increased regulations on us. From the state perspective, what they've tried to do, they've made recommendations over time about removing what's called I&I, which is inflow and infiltration, essentially sources of groundwater and rainwater getting into the system. Costs money to treat water, clean rainwater,
Right.
So it's not something you want. Again, increased regulation over time. The state DEP started out with, we'd like you to do this, we'd like you to do that. Now they're creating more regulations where we had to actually submit an I&I plan to them, I&I removal plan, how we're gonna take steps to actually remove rainwater. Over time, the system, North Andover's done a very good job. I've only been here 3 years, so they've taken a lot of good steps. Early on, many years ago, they recognized that drainage systems, house foundation drains were tied into the sewer system. They identified them, and they disconnected them and connected them to the drain system. So we've taken steps like that over the years. Now, when we look at our I&I plan, we look at sources where water is getting in. Pump stations are a really good source. So we're looking at making improvements, and you'll see that in the budget, whereby we do make, and we've presented this to DEP, they've approved our plan, and over time, we expect to take more and more infiltration out of the system. That's,
Do you think that, like, how much, and I have no sense, I guess, of how much that will mitigate some of those combined sewage overflows?
well, I mean, if you look at it, we're really a fraction of what's going into the
Absolutely.
river. We're
Yep.
15% of the flow. And we don't have industry discharging right into the river. We have separated sewer from our rain drainage. But again, we are contributing overall. It's tough to get a sense. I mean, we're doing monitoring. We know we have sources of water entering in. It's just hard to quantify because it varies by seasonal, and we know we should get it out of the system as best as possible. You'll never be able to eliminate it 100% though.
So it is located in North Andover, but we treat all these, the sewage coming from the various towns, right?
That's correct.
So if we are contaminating the river, in future, if we get, whose liability would it be? The towns, even though we are treating all the various towns' sewage. So in future, if there is any suit, legal case against us, would the town suffer, or all the various other towns whose sewage we are treating?
Yeah, I think it's, again, the GLSD was created by an act of the legislator. I'm not a lawyer, so I really couldn't say. And again, I think from a contamination issue, it's, for the most part, we're treating what we can treat. And it's only in heavy, heavy rain events where we have these discharges. The one exception, and this is really what brought this to light, is on October 30th, 2017, when we had the wind and rainstorm where the town lost power for a week. The facility went down for 13 hours, so we couldn't pump. I know this is getting a little bit off topic, but I think it is germane to the discussion, in that what we found out is that when the plant was developed, the regulation was you had to have two sources of electric power. What we didn't know is that those two sources actually ultimately went to the same substation. So we met the requirement. We've since, yes, so, again, we wouldn't have known that if this hadn't happened, that windstorm took out Wood Hill. We've since, through a grant through Massachusetts, the state, we've installed a generator. So now the pump station can handle a lot. We don't worry about it going down as much because now we have that separate source. In addition to that, the biomass, we can run the plant without a separate electric feed. So the plant's in very good position. Upgrading the pumps, there are things that we can do. But ultimately, we have a NIPDES permit. We have an EPA permit. Discharges are going to happen. We're one plant of many along the river. I think there are at least 5 plants all the way up into New Hampshire. And we're really a smaller portion of what gets discharged. With that said, we don't want to see any discharges. But ultimately, it's going to be a long time before we could ever get to that point, and a great expense.
So the GLSD is a quasi-government type organization, and its focus seems to me is primarily on the plant itself, improving what comes into it, making sure they handle it as well as they can. But then it's up to the individual municipalities to do their thing. Am I getting this right? So that North Andover, separate from the GLSD, is actually having to manage their rainwater, manage their drains and stuff. What about, I mean, we're able to budget for that. We can able to say, hey, you're not putting enough money towards that effort. But what about, I know we have no influence with the other municipalities, but there's something, there's a disconnect there.
It's a tough situation. I mean, Lawrence, obviously, they have the biggest portion of the flow. They're about 50% of the flow. That's where a lot of the industry is. It's tough because it's a disadvantaged community. And ultimately, it's up to EPA and DEP to look at what the regulations are and what's acceptable for Lawrence's plan. Again, their plan is going to be different than ours. We have different needs. We have pumping station. They have a lot of industry which we don't have. So it's a good question. I don't know how to answer it. I can tell you in our discussions, we talk a lot about what the other communities are doing. And, it's because we all ultimately want clean water. And I will say, based on, again, in Lawrence, if it wasn't for Lawrence, we wouldn't have this plant. We'd be stuck like a lot of other communities. We would have had to build our own plant at tremendous expense. And so we're fortunate that we were in a regional system. And as far as the cleanliness, and ultimately, when you discharge raw sewage, you're discharging pathogens, and that's a concern to anyone downstream, anybody that uses the river, especially those getting their water source. But it is really a fraction. I mean, there's a lot of dilution that goes on, and I'm not trying to minimize that. And if you look at what they were discharging years ago, 30, 40 years ago, compared to now, it's a lot cleaner. And I think what you're seeing, and I think I've talked about this before, is when we look at expenses, obviously that's what you look at moving forward, what are some of the expenses we're going to have? When we look at the NIPDES permit, and I've had some experience in this in other communities, EPA is looking at what are the impairments in the river. One of the things that we see an awful lot of is phosphorus. I'm not saying that it's impaired for phosphorus, but when you have a lot of agriculture sources and a lot of fertilizers. So EPA looks at that and says, the plant needs to do something to treat phosphorus, which is a big expense. They do it for metals. A lot of places, aluminum. But right now, EPA is looking at the data. The GLSD is submitting data. And so we've been doing a lot of our own testing to see what we're actually discharging and how the river has changed over time.
It's very surprising to me because on one hand, it's assumed that it's not too much of pollution that we are creating. On the other hand, we focus on our reservation or reserved areas, conservation areas, and it just doesn't match because you can't be saying that that is not getting polluted, whereas this you have to worry about what kind of rainflow water or house, whatever drainage goes into those areas. So we really need to look at this because this will eventually kill the maybe the fish or the plants, or it may create a lot of pollution. And also I wanted to ask about what about the waste? You are generating biogas electricity
Yes.
using the biogas, but what about the waste, actual waste? What do you do with that?
Again, they try and use as much as possible. And I think over time, we've looked at various, they've treated it in different ways. Some of it has been shipped off to fertilizing plants. I mean, so I think it's something that the executive director over there is always looking at. What is the next best thing? What should we be doing? And every facility does it a little bit differently, and we're kind of subject to the changes in the industry.
That's good. Fertilizer is good, actually, yeah.
So could you just explain to everyone how we are charged, by the GLSD, and if we are doing work on our end as a community, does that directly impact our costs from the GLSD? So, for example, if we're eliminating additional rainwater, does that reduce the amount, the percentage in which we now, are allocated, or how does that work? So, is there a direct benefit that we can kind of see from some of these local capital improvements we're making?
From that perspective, our flow will be less. So you pay per, so you pay essentially for every gallon of sewage you put in the plant that's treated. So if we're reducing, again, we're paying money to treat rainwater.
Right.
If you can reduce it, it's benefiting us, a direct benefit, in that we're not paying for as much flow.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that's great. I mean, that's a helpful thing for us to know too when we're looking at a capital improvement plan, or understanding what you guys need, that there's now a direct benefit to our taxpayers and to our community. So how does that translate into looking forward? What kind of things should we expect? I mean, our rates as a community haven't changed in 9 years. This is the 9th year, FY21. So, how does that look like? And Lynn, feel free to also speak to this. But what do we want to anticipate in terms of rates going forward? And then also, any additional capital that you think that the GLSD is going to need to make that then will get passed through to us as a participant, or that we should make as a community separately from that in the next couple of years. It's a loaded question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So,
But I'm just trying to,
future
Yeah.
guessing here.
and I get, that that's just a guess, but if there's some
Yeah.
things that you're gonna have to budget for going forward, it would be helpful for
Jen
us.
might know of future projects that they might be talking about.
Yeah.
Which would generate
yeah.
additional assessment because the capital cost would go up.
Right.
yeah, so right now, again, just getting the biofuel online was an incredible feat, and it's really something to be proud of. I also should have mentioned that they have the solar. They have solar panels there. They actually, now that we're creating our own energy, we have to find a source to sell that solar to. Good problem to
great,
have.
right?
It's a really good problem to have. So getting the pump stations, increasing the pump capacity is really that's our next big focus, getting through this project. And then, I don't think there are any plans to expand the plant to more capacity. That's the other benefit I should mention is, you can't have any type of development without sewer. You just can't. So when we look at expanding our sewer system for, let's say, the Amazon plant that's proposed, it's a good problem that we have is that they've got plenty of capacity. Where I came from before, we were paying for upgrades to the plant to create more capacity. So right now, we don't have any, and that's generally a huge expense. So when we look at the horizon, we haven't even talked about any type of expansion. They have enough flow to sell, which is great. As far as the rate structure, yeah, you're paying for the capital and you're paying for the operating cost. Operating costs, in some respects, are going down because of we're not buying energy anymore. And some costs will go up just because certain things. We see it in our own water treatment plant. Ozone chemicals that we have to buy. You know, we're subject to the market.
Right.
So there are those expenses that'll go up. As far as rates, I don't think
Yeah.
we have any plans at this point. I think
No.
we've,
So what's happening is because we're using retained earnings to do all of our capital improvement plan, projects, we're decreasing the capital. I mean, our debt payments. So our debt is falling off, which is opening up operating availability within the budget. So if we have additional costs that we can push through the budget for capital improvement plans and things like that, we're balancing it out, so we don't have to raise the rates at this point, unless we find that somewhere down the line, which I haven't seen in the 5-year plan, any enormous capital improvement plans, because they do a really good job of, because everybody supports the infrastructure here and the capital improvement plan, and keeping up with the upgrades and maintaining it and doing the projects as we're going along within the water and sewer. So I don't see it, in my tenure here, any need for increases in the rates so far. And I don't think there are any projections to do that.
And so really, would that only come from, you know, something on the GLSD side where maybe there's some kind of regulation that we now have to adhere to, which requires an upgrade, an unanticipated capital
Yep.
improvement? Is that kind of what I'm?
that could happen.
It could.
And that absolutely could happen. And we'll see in our new NIPD's permit, there'll be things that we have to do. Internally in our own system, NIPD, sorry,
Do you know the
National
acronym?
Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. We have it on the sewer side, and they've migrated it into the drainage side, where we have a MS4 permit, municipal separate sewer drainage. Again, these acronyms, I apologize.
No,
I've been
that's
living with them
okay.
for 30
The name's
years.
huge.
Yeah, essentially, everything, it's through the EPA, their Clean Water Act from 1970s, early 70s. Our own system, yeah, we have areas that are aging. We do have clay sewers, which clay pipe lets a lot of that inflow and infiltration in. So right now, we don't have any plans to replace it. We don't have a whole lot of breaks and that sort of thing. Our water system, same thing. I know I'm switching gears. They're both enterprise funds. We take the same approach. It's managed by the same people. So, you have areas that we have to address a little more often than others with cleaning the pipes and because they're relatively flat. But we don't have any major concerns right now. The pump stations, we're going to be looking internally, probably better communication systems. Right now, it's all analog, so we'll be looking at digital systems. We'll be looking at replacing the pumps. So we'll have those, which could, will increase our cost over time. But right now, barring a disaster, aside from that, we, with the Amazon, we did get a grant from the state, $2.3 million, combined with the $2.3 million approved at last town meeting. And then I believe the Amazon site is going to contribute the last third of it. We're going to be looking at extending new sewer down Route 125.
Yep.
Hopefully in time, that'll get us more customers, make the system more sustainable. It'll be new pipe, so hopefully we won't have any maintenance for it for a long time. But I think that's probably the only expansion we see right now. Typically, water and sewer expansions are done by development. This just happened to be a private, private partnership.
Are you looking at recycling the stormwater to these industries and, selling and making money?
The stormwater?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know that there's a market for that.
the industries, they require water, right?
Oh, I see what you're, so interestingly enough, GLSD does actually sell some of the gray water to, the Wheelabrator plant. So yeah, for their cooling system, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean. So, we benefit from the revenue that GLSD receives from that. From us, I haven't been approached by, and I'm not sure if there's anything local that, and I don't know that we have the facilities to capture the rainwater. Right now, it's all discharge. Drainage is really the ugly stepchild of the utility industry. It's a huge expense, and there aren't really those opportunities to get revenue from it.
Maybe if we can get some grant and.
We're always looking at grants, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think all communities are in the same situation,
Yep.
unfortunately.
Were any of your systems affected by the Columbia gas?
They were indirectly. So essentially, you had Columbia Gas ripping up the town,
Right.
a good portion of the town. And a lot of, or some of what they did, they were directionally drilling. They were slip lining. And over time, we've seen this, every community I've been in, when you're doing those sort of things, the gas main goes through sewer lines all the time. And you typically don't find out till later on. A resident will have, a backup. And so we've responded to a few of those while they were doing the emergency, while they were doing the restoration, and even after. Columbia Gas has been, they've had to pay for the repair, but yes, they certainly have impacted more so the sewage, probably more so the drainage, I should say. It's, because the drainage you wouldn't know unless there's, a
Somewhere.
major backup, and that typically doesn't happen. Sewage, because we're talking services, not a lot of capacity in the pipe, so, yeah, a few residents have had to go through the agony of that in addition to, the gas emergency.
And they completely recouped us for those costs, right?
Yeah, we tracked our time, but
Great.
generally, they were actually affecting the repairs, so we were just more monitoring than anything else.
So that was a direct.
Yeah.
Yep, they took care of it.
Okay, yep.
So, does anything keep you awake at night?
What a loaded question.
Trees.
Trees?
Trees keep me up at night. They really do. It's, we have a number of trees throughout town. Yes, everything could fail at any moment, so, fortunately, the town has done a good job in maintaining their systems. But again, we didn't expect that wind and ice and storm. These things happen whenever, public utilities are subject to natural disasters. So I think we've had our fill. And probably the gas is something, that gas emergency is something I never experienced in 30 years, so, and nobody around here had ever either, so, I think I've had my fill of that.
So maybe we can use the GLSD as backup electricity for the town if it goes out again.
That was a brutal week. I remember that week. That was a hard week, I think, for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And so do we, unless anyone has water and sewer questions, I'm gonna switch gears because we have you, if you guys don't mind. You mentioned trees. So just, you might have, I don't mean to open that
Yeah,
can
no.
of worms, but how do we as a community kind of deal with that, right? So trees on, that potentially need to be trimmed or worked on, and, do we have a kind of strategic plan that you guys follow on to move through that, or how does it work?
Trees it's just one of those constant maintenance items. And one of the things that we have to deal with is mature trees. They look beautiful, they cause numerous problems with our sidewalks. So we're taking on a whole roadway reconstruction project because of the gas emergency. They're funding it, but now we have to solve the problem of tree roots. So these mature trees in meeting ADA issues. So how do you fit a compliant sidewalk with a beautiful, mature tree? We can cut the roots, kill the tree eventually. So we have to deal with those sort of things. The other issue, a few weeks ago, again, this is continuous, get called, a tree fell, actually hit somebody's house. So the next question is, you help with what you can, our crews that is, not knowing whether the tree is town or private. Then we have to determine afterwards, is it private or is it a town tree? So do we have to pay to remove this massive tree that just fell down? And a lot of times, it's essentially a tree may have been planted on private property and is expanded into the right-of-way. So we're dealing with those type of issues. Maintenance of trees, it is just so overwhelming. We have one bucket truck. We can't keep up. We have asked for more money. We've received more money to contract out tree maintenance, but that is something that's always on our minds.
National Grid has a vested stake in making sure trees are maintained as well. Do they share that part of the cost? I mean, how is that collaborative with the town and what they do?
This has always been a tough one. So I want to say by law, essentially, well, it's in their best interest to maintain the trees. They've learned over time with ice emergencies and, the power outages that we've had that they really have gone through aggressive trimming their trees or trimming trees that could impact their wires. The problem is what's left a lot of times is not very desirable. As I've been going through with looking at the roads we're going to be reconstructing, I see more trees that look like this around power lines. There's nothing left but a stump and 2 leader branches. If we were to contact them with a hazardous tree in the wires, they're required to take the tree down below the wires. We don't get involved in any trimming any trees within the wires. But then you're left with a giant stump that we have to maintain. And again, now you're getting into that, does the town want them to clear cut? And take away some of the character of the town at the benefit of less power outages and less damages. And it's a tough one. It's a tough balancing act. And again, we struggle with that as well. And I'm struggling with it, especially with the sidewalk issues. And, one of the other aspects to offset that is the town they've been pushing for a tree replacement program. So that's the other thing that we're looking at. If we're going to be clearing trees, we should be planting them, at least at a 1-to-1.
Right.
But in a manner and a method that isn't going to impact future maintenance and cost to the town.
Right.
Just as there is a bylaw for constructing anything within the property line, you have to leave certain gap. Do we have a bylaw related to trees as well?
So trees are governed, there is a public shade tree requirement, state regulations. And I think what you're referring to is the right-of-way line. So every road's going to vary. If we take let's say a new subdivision, a roadway is going to be 50-foot right-of-way. Town's property is 50 feet, which from the center line of the road is generally 25 feet. New road, you can do that. Old roads, they weren't necessarily built like that. We have a lot of old sections in town. So what that means is the right-of-way in most instances goes beyond the pavement, and it's going to vary. Sometimes it's going to be, if it's a new road, it could be 13 feet off the right-of-way. So in the subdivision process, and when new subdivisions are being built, ideally they're planting these trees on private property, then it's the homeowner's responsibility. I can tell you in years past, and we're going through the records, the town actually did plant trees on private property and then got right of entries, and so now that's creating a whole new maintenance headache. Did we assume the responsibility to maintain those in perpetuity? So, listen, ideally, I'd love to say we have 50-foot right-of-way everywhere. We've got grass strips, 5-foot sidewalks, and a nice area to put trees. It's not always the case. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at as far as when developing the tree replacement program. Does it make sense to plant it on private property and get an easement? Again, we're looking long-term. You want to pick a species that's going to survive and thrive, and you want that future, 25 years from now, you want the town to look tree-lined. And based on the fact that we have such old section, I don't think we have a choice but to go on private property. And that's and I get residents calling all the time. I'd love to have a tree on my property if the town's, and I'll maintain it, just plant it.
Other than
Yeah.
having to rake the leaves. and
Yeah.
all that.
Well, again,
They're beautiful, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of work.
there is a lot of maintenance.
So I do have a budget question on the water, and maybe this is more Lynn directed. It's the salaries went down $42,000 from the prior year. I think this is one of those budgets because with the
Allocation.
I'm sorry?
It's the percentage allocation.
It is an
amongst all-
allocation
yep,
thing, okay.
yep. We haven't decreased any employees, we've still got the same amount. Haven't added any, it's just a reallocation,
Okay.
different buckets, different departments. Yep.
Sort of figured it out for a while, yeah, after a while.
Does anyone have any more questions?
Just a comment, I think your team's doing still a great work.
Yeah.
We're good work, and I do
Thanks.
respect and appreciate it.
And I think, hearing so much in the news and having our senators and reps kind of talking about the Merrimack River, it's always on the forefront, at least of my mind, right? How is this gonna directly impact us as a community, in North Andover specifically? And so to have that explained a little bit and know that there's things we can do ourselves as North Andover, and then ways that we can manage this going forward, is really helpful. So thank you for that thorough explanation and the conversation tonight.
I brought 'em.
Real quick question, and let me cover your ears up on this, because it's always like, well, whatever. Is there something that you didn't get, you wished?
No, I will tell you though, one of the things we're struggling, in fact, Lynn and I were just talking about, when you look at municipal government, just in general, getting people who would be interested in taking these type of jobs. Lynn,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
in the
it's
accountant world and in our world, we have a water treatment plant that we're, state of the art. It's tough to find operators, people who want to do that sort of work. So, no, it's not a matter of, am I getting what I need? But I do worry about the future as to how are we gonna be able to maintain? We're losing operators, we're all every department is struggling with that.
I mean, we've got
Yeah.
an aging staff.
Mm.
And
Is that
they're
a-
at
is
the
that a
verge of retirement, and it's you can't find the people to replace them, because they don't wanna work in municipal government, or they don't wanna do this type of work.
So specifically for the plan, is that salary specific, like in the private sector, doing something with a similar skill set achieves a much higher wage, or is it just this type of skill set is not often taught at this point, or what is the?
I think it's a combination. I mean, obviously, we always lose employees to high, they move on, which isn't a bad thing. You want people to grow, you want your employees to grow, and it's just, there's a real shortage in the industry. And so I think it's more so the training and the licensing that it takes to get into this field. It's an awful lot. It takes a number of years before you have to have a grade 4 license to run the plant here. And we're seeing it from GLSD too. That's one of the updates that we get all the time, where we're losing employees. And, some of it's supply and demand, of course, but I think it's more so, like Lynn said, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of people that want to come into this. Now, so we're, the town manager, we're looking at the co-op operations of what's gonna happen if a coronavirus hit and we can't all be here. So we're looking at those. One of the things I'm thinking internally from our own plant is, in the future, I may make requests for staff at lower grade levels, so that ideally they may be able to move up. And that's some of the things that we're looking at, just the organization in general. Are we replenishing, are there places for people to move into and gain that experience, and ideally love the town as much to stay here?
Could we ever work with, Superintendent Gilligan and have some kind of program directly, a feeder program from the high school? So as a training program, so essentially, it's community specific, it's only for North Andover resident, students, and you start that specific co-op program your senior year, and you train, and it's for credit. And then from there, you basically start at that first level with a specific training program that says by age whatever, you'll be at this level. We'll provide you with this training if you're part of this program, but you have to make a commitment to be with us for this many years.
Yeah.
Or the community college that we have here. We can tie up with that. Actually, that's exactly how we had a software company, and we used to take kids from the Essex Community College, right?
Northern Essex?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we used to train them. We used to train them and gradually then make them ready to become programmers. So in the same way, if we really have a shortage, we can probably talk to them and have a program and get them in. We have to set goals, and like he said, if they see money coming and what kind of money would they be making, maybe they would get interested.
It's good ideas. I mean, it's, something we hadn't really thought about. It's a lot of hands-on, a lot of on-the-job training, so it's probably a good idea.
I mean, not to be terrible, but I don't know legally how this works, so forgive me, Greg, if I'm, but it starts with literally free labor, right? So if they're getting these credits, if they're, it's, so your cost, your cost of human capital that you're using to train these people, they've already made a commitment, you're, at least there's no out-of-pocket expense,
We'd
and
have to look at the
I don't know how it
logistics of
works,
how
but
it would work and, yeah.
might be a cool idea.
It could be, I mean, whether you can get some kids that are in the high school level that would be interested in something like this. It's something you gotta entice them.
It's,
to do,
it is a
because
lot,
it's not-
and it's a lot of work on our part too as
Right.
well, but we're willing to do it
Right,
because we do see
mentoring.
this shortage. I will tell you, we have a couple of employees over at the plant who are just absolutely fantastic, and they love to give tours. And so believe me, when we get the high school, the environmental groups that wanna come in, we do a lot with Merrimack College. We really try and get them excited about it, so there's something about clean water.
I
that
didn't
we
realize
all
that was
need.
an option, because we might be doing a finance committee tour.
Absolutely,
Really?
absolutely.
cool.
It is they do a
Sign
great
up.
job. Yeah, it's really, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love it, so, but
That's why you're in the business.
absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Really
welcome.
appreciate it, everyone. Kind of questions answered. We thank you. Have a wonderful night. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
And I think we'll keep Lynn because we have some stuff to chat about.
Yes.
Have a safe drive, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you much.
So this was actually not on our agenda,
Right.
but we are. Lynn is just going to talk to us about the senior center project, and so she prepared some info for us. Pass it down.
Okay. So we've got the bids in from the senior center finally, and reviewed them all and got an updated schedule from the architect and the engineer. What we have discovered is, again, is that in order for us to proceed with the senior center as it's designed on the property that we had donated from Minco, we need to increase our capital project requests for this year for the senior center from 2.5 million up to $3 million. So it's $500,000 more. And I'll explain to you how we got to that. After extensively reviewing the facilities master plan when it was originally put into place, the senior center was one of the projects amongst the 7 projects that were outlined. And that project was looked at as being a renovation of the building out back, not a new construction. So it was put in at $5.5 million to renovate, expand, whatever they decided, where they were gonna expand, who knew, maybe up, I don't know. There's not much space out there. So, over the 6 years throughout all the other projects, that $5.5 million was never increased or adjusted based on what is being presented today for the senior center on this separate piece of property in a new construction, in a brand-new senior center. So, As well, there was no FF&E included in that number. There was no IT or computers or anything like that, or any type of security that was in that $5.5 million. So after the bids came in, we reviewed everything, the design is in place. It's a beautiful, gonna be a beautiful senior center. It came in at $9.4 million. Okay, so with the funding that we had, we knew we plugged a number in the capital. When we presented the capital improvement plan to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, the town manager did say that this was a placeholder within the capital because we had to wait till the bids came in. Because we didn't want to present something and request a town meeting for something that we didn't have all the numbers on again.
Yep.
So with the increase in tariffs for all of the the materials for building and construction, this is where the costs are at. And we adjusted them a little. We went over it. We did, our value engineering. So we have vetted through these numbers. There was no contingency originally in the $5.5 million. So there was a whole lot wrong with that original $5.5 million. A senior center to construct nowadays is anywhere from $9 to $10 million for this size senior center. So we are presenting you with this information because you again will need to revote your capital improvement plan with the amendment of adding $500,000 to the senior center to bring it to $3 million.
Okay. And is it typical, if just looking at your project cost estimate on the second page, for these projects to have a 4% contingency?
It was 7%. We brought it down to 4% because we felt that 7% was way too high.
Is 4% high enough?
Yep, we feel it is. So, because we have all of the contingencies built in. There's the clerk of the works, which is actually probably gonna be part of the OPM costs, because they're both one and the same, which, from what I understand. The FF&E is at 204. The architect originally presented it at like 180, 175. So we feel that based on these numbers and doing all of their value engineering and vetting through this with the architect, that these are good, solid numbers, and that we should be okay to be able to build the senior center.
What are the question marks on the?
That was me questioning, because I wasn't sure what the 49, what the clerk of the works was doing outside of, different than the OPM. So they were, whether we had believed that they were enough. There was question marks next to them, whether we actually needed them or not, but
Where's the clerk of the works?
they oversee the project and they
Okay.
work with, the contractors and make sure they keep them on schedule and,
They basically are our interest.
right,
Okay.
right, yep.
And the bigger question I had is that there's an assumption associated with $7.9 million. It says, assumes pad-ready site.
Yep.
So
And that was
what
a
kind of
good-
assumption is that? Is that a risky? Is that a low risk?
That's with with Minco, who is actually basically partnering with this development. They're the ones that donated the parcel of land. And they are going to be, of course, they've agreed to tear down the buildings and get it site pad ready for us. That's
And
part
that's-
of the donation.
That's negotiated already in documents that they're gonna
As far
provide a
as I know,
pad-ready
yes.
site.
Yep.
And
And they can't do it, of course, until we get through town meeting, because we gotta make sure everything passes. They're not gonna tear down buildings that they're presently getting income from.
so my other question about that is they're also proposing a building on the same site, right?
Correct.
So the pad-ready site, is that dictated around their schedule, their development schedule, or around North Andover's?
It's in combination with our schedule. Yeah, it's gonna be together, because that's why it's a cost
Do
savings.
we have shared infrastructure, basically?
Right, yep, for the sewer and the water coming into the property, which will run down the main driveway, from what I understand, from Sutton Street. It's gonna be constructed together, and then we have to do our stormwater, which is part of our costs and our construction costs, and they're doing their stormwater on theirs, but it's a combined.
Is that already a pre-negotiated contract that's signed that we could review, or is that, I just out of curiosity?
I'm not sure. Since I'm not town manager anymore.
Of course.
I was kind of not been as involved in all of that.
Yep.
But I know they've been meeting on regular schedules, and Melissa should be able to update you more on that. Melissa or Suzanne Egan.
Okay, so I
But
think,
I know they've been before the planning board and all of that, in public meetings and stuff.
all right, so I think that would be something we'd be interested in knowing more about, but
Yep.
we can ask what, I clearly
that
understand that
means.
a negotiation with the developer is you need to do that
Yes.
during, privately or during an executive
Yep.
session and have those conversations, and then
Mhm.
just when things are finalized, just present it, so
Yep.
that we kind of understand, that there's no risk in that pad-ready site number, that there's no additional infrastructure that we would need to, take on as a town, and that's all,
Yep.
I'm
That's all
sure,
built into the
built
cost.
into the
Yeah.
price, but,
And that's part of what the main cost is. I mean, we're building a building completely, and we have to build the infrastructure, we have to do the parking lot, all of that. So this is all part, the document that backs up these numbers is huge. I mean, it's a lot of data.
Mhm. Okay.
And it's gone through the planning board and
we can review that, I haven't
Yep.
yet, so
Yeah.
I'm
And
not speaking from a
you could
place
probably
of,
speak with
I'm not-
Jean.
yeah,
Enright,
I'm
who
not
would be able
speaking
to
from a
provide
place
you
of
more
a ton
information.
of knowledge on this project
Yeah.
at all, so I don't,
Nope.
totally.
And
Um,
it's
so we'll
not my
do our,
expertise either, so
we'll do some research and,
I knew more than I needed to last
Pretty
summer.
well- Will this be very, very firmed up by the time we reach town meeting?
Yes, well, that's why this number that we're presenting, which will be the 3 million that we're asking for in the capital, should be sufficient based on what we already have available. So if you look at the sources of available funding, we had three capital projects, one from 18, 19, and 20. The actual 2018 vote capital project, which was for the original engineering, as you see my footnote here, 276,000 of that was used for the kindergarten.
Right.
So that's what hurt us right off the bat, okay? The engineering contract came in at 583, we only budgeted 472. And we used 276,000 of it for the kindergarten. So we started off in the beginning, right, at the 8 ball behind. We have the 5.5 million for the construction, and last year we voted the additional 750 to help make up for money that was used for kindergarten.
in this year, we
We have to do the 3 million, which
But
will
in that-
get us, which will get us to 9,400,445.
and so that's inclusive of the additional parcel that we need,
When you say,
No, the parcels.
the parcel's separate,
that's separate from the, okay.
that is separate from this, and will be a separate vote at town meeting in the warrant,
So the total cost is actually an additional $600,000
right,
for this project.
for the land, yep. It would have been more had we had to purchase the other piece of land as well, but we didn't, that was donated to us, as,
I mean,
yeah,
understood. But that was an unexpected cost. When this
Right.
was first presented at town meeting, the
that was
additional, the
unexpected.
land is all,
Yep,
got it.
yep.
Just
And
so
then that, again, will be, based on, we're not gonna use free cash, we're not gonna do any debt borrowing for that, we're gonna use overlay, surplus overlay
Okay,
for that purchase.
all right. I think this was really helpful.
Yeah.
This lays that out. We'll review it, and obviously you're missing a few folks. We would not vote on this today, so we'll,
Yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
yeah, you
We
can't.
no, we cannot.
Yeah.
And so we'll digest this. I think we may come back to you. I'll ask the group and those who who were unable to be here, if they have any questions.
Yep, so we can schedule that, I mean, your next meeting or whatever. we can
Great,
come
I'll
back and
I'll include a
before you make
piece,
your vote.
yeah, in our agenda to have that conversation on the
Perfect.
24th.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Good.
Do you have, well, I guess Angela could scan it, but do you have this?
Electronically?
Yeah, could you, that way I'll forward it to everyone.
Yeah, I can share it with, I can
Thank
send
you.
it to you in the morning.
That would be perfect.
Yep. And then, can I just ask you guys a question?
Yeah, of course.
So I just wanted to update you, the warrant, because I know no one's seen the warrant. The warrant has been opened and it will close on the 23rd of
Mhm.
March. You guys will get a copy of it on the 24th, the following morning, after it closes.
Mhm.
And then we just wanted to confirm that your letter will be to us by the 10th, if not sooner, of April.
It won't be sooner, but we
Okay.
have the 10th as a deadline.
Okay,
Only because we have such a, couple people sick.
Yep.
We'll only have 2 meetings before the 10th.
okay,
So
Alright.
we'll review it.
Yep.
next meeting as well. We're gonna review it tonight, and then we'll do a final sweep on the 8th. I'm sure we'll edit it a few more times, and then you'll get
Okay,
it by the 10th.
Perfect, yeah, because we just want to make sure that we meet our printing deadline
Absolutely.
and get that.
And that
out.
was the date on
As
the
long
budget
as-
calendar, right? The
What's
10th? That was the
Yes,
date,
that-
okay.
That's the date on the calendar.
That's what I had. I
Yep.
want to make sure I was
Yep.
not
Nope,
pushing
you're
it.
right. It is the one on the calendar, as long as town meeting isn't canceled. If anybody
Can we have a
saw-
virtual town? Is there a virtual
No,
option?
you
How does
cannot.
that gonna work?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We have to have a town meeting before June 30th, though. Bottom line, or we won't have, we can't run town. We can't run government. We have to have a budget. We have to have a budget.
Wonder if you can do virtual votes,
No, no, you can't.
even during a state of emergency? Wondering how that
I
works.
don't think so.
All right. It's
So,
above my pay grade, so.
I'm on it, Yeah. Mine too.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. I
Okay,
appreciate
perfect.
it.
Great, thanks.
All right, let's have a quick, I'm gonna do things out of order if that's okay with everyone. We have in here a second public comment, and I just didn't know if anyone, I can take that before our warrant letter format discussion, which is a little bit tedious, if anyone has an additional public comment. Nope, okay, just making sure. Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate it. Have a good night. All right, there is no additional public comment. We are going to move right into discussing our warrant letter format discussion, which we do every year. If you look at what was included in your folder, thank you very much, Angela. We have kind of what we decided was our warrant letter sections, and also our annual finance committee report to voters from last year. So this is, was pulled right from the warrant.
Am I
Just-
missing something? I have.
Oh, maybe I did, only I have that, don't I? I thought you gave it to everyone, right? Yeah.
Okay, Lynn, I don't have it.
Well, it's okay. We got extras. Thank you.
I've got it. If they're,
We got one.
they're
Thank,
touching it, they're making me,
you'll
It's
be
hot.
fine. Okay, so, this is so for those that are, this is your first year on the finance committee, this is, I thought, really helpful to have, also to refer back to for formatting purposes. So I am not, we kind of we took a format, I think, 4 years ago, and then it has evolved slightly every year in different ways. Yeah, I think we've tried to make it more concise so that it's easily digestible, that we're not completely repeating what the town manager is already saying in her explanation of the budget, and it also includes some of our, key focus points and looking forward, which I think is helpful and important. So, we outlined the warrant letter sections in the beginning of, before the budget season really kicked off, and I just wanted to go through those and make sure that, again, we're missing a few tonight, but, there was nothing that you guys had questions about, and you were clear on the things that you were kind of focusing on. And, if you guys had any feedback on format, if there was anything that you felt like we could improve on from last year, I really like that we had an executive summary. I think that was a really big improvement last year, where it was kind of like a bullet point, so that if all someone gets through is our executive summary with some bullets, they get the most important pieces of what we're trying to highlight. And then if they feel like they want to read more, they can.
Actually, I love the format. Obviously, the improvements may come, but I think someone sitting down, waiting for town meeting to start, and they have this before them, I think this reads relatively easy. I'm biased as heck, obviously, but this was well done last year. And I do also think too, like, as you said, you do put a couple things in here forward-looking. And we started out a few years back with the OPEB, and that produced some good stuff.
Yeah.
I think the GLSD is a good thing as you started looking at it. I think that was in last year's as well. So, those are the kinds of things that make a mark on the town going in the future, so what are we concerned about? Just some thoughts, you know, we're talking about, master plan too, talking about the schools, the middle school. I mean, these things are really on our horizon. I mean, you can actually see them and you can actually smell them, so I'm sure that some of that may end up being in part of here, like how we fund that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for me, one of the big points, and you and Chris will really tackle this in the school section, bless you, is really, you know, thinking strategically about finance, you know, how we're going to finance the schools or budget for the schools, achieve the schools' 5-year strategic plan that they presented. Because, you know, we were really lucky to achieve, you know, that this year. Not, you know, we have to be really forward thinking about how we're going to do that going forward. So maybe that's, you know, something.
Stevens Estate would be something,
Absolutely.
right?
You got that? So that, you know, that will be a whole separate section that Jen will focus on. I think,
Quick on the Stevens Estate, because obviously whatever you say, it's also something that may be before town meeting, so obviously they have to gel. And to just,
I'm not, our committee's not gonna be done with this work before town meeting.
perfect.
No, not perfect. No, I'm very not perfect,
Well, I just,
actually.
because by April 10th is like, okay, this goes to press, and
Yeah.
then by sometime in April, another vote comes up, it's like, oh, kill those votes.
Yeah, no, I think our work will still be ongoing.
okay,
Okay,
It appears to be a long process.
okay.
all right. And we'll ask you for an update during old business.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
One thing about the format, though, while we're talking about it,
Yeah, please.
in thinking through the executive summary, I just sort of think the things you just highlighted, like the big picture, here are the things that we see coming down the pipe, like things to keep your eye on, that might go well in like a couple of bullets in the executive summary as well. Like, I don't know, I just think that folks may read only that executive summary.
So if you take a look at the last paragraph,
Paragraph.
Oh,
It just unfortunately printed,
sorry.
unfortunately like that, we, you know, that's just how it printed. I think that we should be, yes, strategic in that we try to get that all on one page if we can. We tried very hard unsuccessfully. There's also, you know, a huge, when, the way they print it, they have to put this box in, and so that's part of it. But I agree with you, absolutely.
Yeah, it's right there. Good job, guys.
but it's like, yeah, you can almost slide over it. It's like, it'd be nice to get it on the forefront.
Yes.
Yep.
That's a good point. And we'll try to make that happen this year. Okay. All right, so I guess you guys tell me if this is achievable, but I would love to kind of ask everyone to have their, you know, even if it's not a fully written section, but just have your key points and bullets and, you know, data kind of outlined for next meeting. It's 2 weeks. You know, I think most of us, unless you're a new member, have focused on these areas for a couple years, so you should be relatively familiar with the format and all that good stuff. And what that will do is at least allow us to, on the 24th, hone in on what our key points are, what we find most important, and so we can really outline this. Then you'll have another maybe week to write it all out and then send it around, and we can finalize it on April 8th. And usually 1 or 2 of us volunteer to do the editing and make sure it sounds like one full voice and go from there.
That looks fine.
Yep, all right, that's fine.
Does that work?
Good.
Yep.
All right, great. So we'll keep moving here. Approval of minutes.
Can't do
What? Oh, we can't.
Can't do it.
We don't have enough.
Can't even close the meeting officially.
You can have 4 people, but they all have to agree.
Or I can
But-
leave,
but you
and
know
then you
what?
can do it.
You,
What?
No, actually,
you can,
No, we need
you're
more.
right,
wait till
yeah.
next week, the next.
We're just gonna wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old business.
Swear me in as a
Temporary.
You're gonna deputize.
All right.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm not a North Andover resident.
Would make you a temporary citizen too?
Do you want to talk about the Stevens Estate during old business?
Sure. So the Stevens Estate Long-Term Committee is continuing to meet. We're on about an every other week schedule, and we're continuing to make some good progress. Although it seems like it's going to be a longer-term project to get through to a vote or to some sort of recommendation or report out to the Board of Selectmen. I think initially the idea when the Board of Selectmen decided to put the committee together was that the committee would have a recommendation and some sort of report out so that it could be incorporated into this year's town meeting. Unfortunately, the committee didn't really actually get formed until the end of November. I think it took that long to get all of the members selected and everything up and running. So we're running about, 5 or 6 months behind where we should have been if we had started as expected. What our work has focused on is primarily looking at both what the vision is for the Stevens Estate and then different viable operating models that we can sort of, push and pull on and see how viable these different operating models are. Our primary focus has been on something very similar to the current operating model, a hybrid public-private partnership with an organization such as the Trustees of Reservation, Mass Audubon Society, or some other major large organization that has significant funding and could handle the capital improvements that the state needs. And then there is still some interest in pursuing a long-term lease type option with a commercial entity like what was put before town meeting last year, although that really does sort of fall into a distant third based on the town reaction. We've done a lot of gathering of people's opinions. We've put out surveys, and there will be a flash vote survey going out soon where if folks sign up for it, you should have seen it. If you get agendas from the town, you can sign up for it. They would push that out to do one more wave, and we're encouraging the town, if it's allowed, to do some sort of like publicizing the surveys or the opportunities to give feedback at the local election that's coming up in a few weeks, because we figured those would be people who are voting in that might be engaged and care about the Stevens Estate as well. So that at least seems to be coming to an end. We've had several meetings with with Joanna, the director of the Stevens Estate. She's come in and talked about sort of the challenges, the benefits, all of the different aspects of running it under the current model. We've taken a tour of the facility and gotten a real honest appraisal of what needs to be done to get different parts of the facility back up to a good spot where the deferred maintenance has been taken care of. And then we've also met with a representative of the Trustees of Reservation just to understand why they would be interested and what that possibility might be and what that operating model might look like. So we're still doing a lot of diligence in trying to understand the different options.
How is your survey response rate?
So right now I think we have over, I want to say somewhere between 50 and 100 responses to a very open-ended survey. And so that's been pretty good. And the responses are all over the place. It's, we'd love to see it used just for weddings. I love to hike there. I think it should be open more to school groups. There's just a lot of variety in what people want from the estate. And so my takeaway from it in a very unscientific way is that the people who are aware of the facility and the estate want to be able to have continued varied use from it and want to see better use made of it. But people are a little bit nervous about the costs of maintaining it. So.
Okay. That's helpful.
So.
Thank you.
I would have a lot of questions, but that's not fair. You're in the diligence process still, so I'll wait. I'll hold.
No, I'm happy to
No,
answer any
that's
questions
fine.
if you want.
I mean, the one question I had when you mentioned the trustees, is there a real interest there, or was that just, yeah?
No, I mean, I think there is, but I think it's a dance. And I think that, we are not empowered to have a real discussion about what that would look like. And from the trustees' perspective, they, in their long-range plan, they are looking to add, I think they said about 5 new reservations over the next, in their next chunk of development. And they're being very selective about where they choose to take on new properties. But they did sort of say they would have to go through their own diligence process, but what they know now, without having done that diligence process, they would be very interested. So I think that there is an option that is certainly worth pursuing.
Okay. Do you know their selection criteria?
There's a number of different selection criteria, and I would have to go back to the information, but they look for sites that are unique, historic, that have the open land and have, you know, a lot of different, resources. Here, what they were particularly interested in was the unique way that, not just the, building itself and that opportunity, but also sort of the way that the land links to their other properties. And so the ability to string the properties together and have this network of properties was something that seemed really attractive to them.
Interesting.
And then I think there is also a lot of interest in, from the more that we're talking to sort of other municipal owned and run facilities like this, the Stevens Estate is held in really high regard. And I think there is a significant opportunity for it to be profitable were it run in a way that sort of boosts that. And I think there's been some definite challenges, but I think the trustees see that and, you know, they have other properties that they operate in a way where they do functions. I think it was at Green's Estate maybe. So they have that experience, and it's something that they see as a potential, I think, income source for them in order to maintain as well. So it seemed like a varied interest. I mean, because the estate's so huge and massive and there are so many different facets to it, they really seem drawn into all of it. So
we'll just wait for
Yeah.
for you guys to keep doing your work and get periodic updates, and
I
thank you
appreciate
for
it.
your
I really
time. We very much appreciate and recognize it, and we're lucky to have you as our representative, because it is nice to have you there to be a good advocate for our community. So thank you.
thanks.
So I also wanted to mention an old business. We had talked about non-disclosure agreements in our community, and we had heard and talked to Melissa about them, and she had let us know that 3 had been signed in the last 3 years. That's something we've already talked about. I did want to mention that my understanding is that I think she and like the town side and also the school side are also thinking about and working towards putting a policy in place as part of their personnel handbook. The specifics of that, I think, are still being worked out, and they're having conversations about, but I think that's something that they're going to vote on in the future, which is a really positive thing, and that will allow us to have an understanding of what, you know, dollars may be spent on them, or really that they wouldn't be, you know, dollars spent in consideration for those agreements. I think they're still working on all that, so I just wanted to let you guys know that I think that's happening behind the scenes, and we may see something in the future, just because we did ask those questions, and you know, did find out that there weren't dollars paid specifically for those agreements, although there may have been some ancillary, you know, costs that can't be disclosed as part of them, right? There's other things, but I think that our inquiry was worthwhile. So thank you guys for having those discussions, and thank you definitely to Melissa, Town Manager Rodriguez, and being transparent and us, helping us just ask that question. So wanted to circle back because it is something that we talked about, and I think we'll just now let the 2 boards that move forward. So that's all I had for old business. Does anyone have anything else you want to just discuss before we adjourn the meeting? All right. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, is anyone going to do that for me?
I'll do the motion to adjourn the meeting.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is closed. Thank you.